Saying that the next day of traveling was uncomfortable would be an understatement. Lucian was lingering behind near constantly, walking through their shadows like a silent greyhound. Any time she or Michaela tried to talk to him, he would simply inch further away until they stopped. However, he didn't stop trying, continuing to speak to Lucian as if he wasn't being ignored. Michaela and Camellia walked ahead, unsure of what to do. While they wanted to engage with the downtrodden man, they simply didn't have the same amount of determination as their guide. The young noble and her loyal maid could only glance back with unease as Key excitedly hopped alongside Lucian, his giddiness almost dichotomous to the unsettling atmosphere.
So, I talked to Camellia and Michaela yesterday, and apparently hobbies are a human thing. I didn't know that. I guess I'm one step from being human too, huh? I'm thinking of getting more involved in gardening and cooking too. Michaela said she liked medicine, and considering you all seem to be able to get injured, maybe I should take that up. Do you know anything about medicine?
For the first time since yesterday evening, Lucian opens his mouth. His voice comes out as a soft croak, his fists beginning to unclench.
I guess only herbs.
Like poultices and antidotes? I do remember you picking up some.
I'm bad at it. I can make salves. That's about it.
Well, if you like it, you should keep at—
I don't.
Oh, well, what do you like?
Lucian, after letting out a sigh, began to rub his face.
Both, but nothing I like is even useful. So why should I say more? It's not like it's even important.
Key's mouth closes with a clack, staring straight at him. The man glares back before averting his gaze.
Just go away. I don't want to talk to anyone right now. But not even you, Key.
The wooden boy's shoulders slack as he pauses his walk for a moment, turning to look at the ground.
Oh, okay. I understand. I hope you feel better, Lucian.
He doesn't respond, staring far away from his friend, as the boy walks away toward Camellia and Michaela. The two women look down at him as his blue eyes fixate on the dirt pathway. Michaela grimaces, then puts an arm on Key's shoulder.
Look, we appreciate you trying to cheer him up, but not even we can get through to him when he's like this.
Camellia can't?
Camellia tenses, then sighs, nodding with affirmation. I'm not really good with him. Seeing him like that just stresses me out. Then he takes that as me being annoyed, and then we argue, and she rubs her arm, shivering slightly. Nothing good comes out of that.
But aren't you the older one? Wouldn't you be—
I guess I don't really understand. Tobias and I don't argue very much. There was that one time, but usually he's calm. At that, Camellia bumps up an eyebrow, crossing her arms.
He sounds more and more elusive every day.
What she means to say is her relationship is very different with Lucian, and there are reasons for it being that way.
Key furrows his brows, his previously slow gait speeding up as he continued on forward, lips pursing as he digested the information. The three of them kept walking on, the moon casting its rays down on them like an ambient aura. Camellia grimaced, rubbing her hip with a sigh. Even if the journey had to be done, it was beginning to get exhausting. Of course, 2 days of near ceaseless walking would do that to you, and it seemed the island of Kalphos was much larger than she thought. The rolling hills having their same green grass, abundant rocks and structures built with seemingly no point. Tall stone walls rose up from the ground into the sky, bits of moss and creeping ivy clinging to their sides. Since the group was constantly walking up and down hills, her ankles were starting to sear with pain.
Key,
How far are we from your brothers?
there's just one more town left. It's called Helmburn, and then his house is just further down the path.
And how far away is that? He pauses his walk, then strokes his chin. The two women turn back to stare at him, his sudden silence making them apprehensive. What is it?
Well, I don't know if it's easy to explain.
Michaela bumped up an eyebrow, tilting her head slightly. What do you mean?
Well, Helmburn changes location sometimes.
Huh?
Normally, it has a fixed position, but it really depends.
Okay, hold on one moment. How exactly does it change location?
I don't know. It just does. I used to go out to see it, and it would just pop, be gone, like it never even existed, and I wouldn't be able to find my way around, right?
The two women stared at him, unable to keep the bewildered expression off their faces. Michaela blinked slowly, as if trying to translate his words from chicken scratch. After a moment, Camellia finally spoke up.
That isn't physically...
Okay, you know what? I'm used to this. She sighed and pinched her nose while Michaela looked at the moon. The maid's gaze was far off and contemplative.
It's getting late, so maybe...
The night went hush and she paused, looking off into the distance. Her shoulders grew tense. Camellia looked over at the maid with concern, before glancing up to whatever she was looking at. Her breath immediately hitched as the air grew cold. Far past Lucian, who was still lingering behind, was a golden light, or more accurately, a string of golden lights. Figures walked among the pathway, heads hung low, almost in prayer.
We need to go.
The wooden boy next to them slowly turned his head to look at the specters, eyes widening in horror. His wooden body clacked, freezing up completely instead of trembling like it had in the past.
Key.
Camellia immediately rushed into action, running back and grabbing Lucian, who made a face of irritation. Before he could question her, she ran over to grab Key's hand, pulling both of the boys far away. Lucian struggled against her, but upon noticing just how fearful she was, he calmed down, ears pointing straight back. The older sister glanced back into the distance, seeing the string of lights get further and further away. Michaela marched forward in a speed walk, braid whipping down her back like a pendulum. Her arms were firmly fixed in a jogging motion, but it was clear to Camellia just how frantic she was. The verdant noble's eyes flicked around with desperation, as trees that were previously sparse gathered around in a small forest. Camellia glanced back at her friend, letting out a hefty breath.
Michaela, what are you...
Without another word, Michaela took a sharp turn off the path.
Mika, wait!
She was paid little heed as Michaela ran off. Key's hand squeezed against hers as he furrowed his brows.
Wait a moment.
Key helped lead Camellia and Lucian forward, both siblings lost and confused. His steps were determined as he helped them catch up to Michaela, who stood still. She was panting, but staring straight ahead. It took a moment to realize what she was staring at. Night's darkness making the surroundings murky, but in front of them stood a cave. The inner maw loomed out towards them, the black inside even more inky than the night.
We can take cover here.
What? In there?
The three look over at him, his previous bitterness erased by fear. Camellia frowned, then looked over at Michaela, unsure of how to take this new development.
Mika, why the cave? I trust you, but...
It was hard for her to speak past that point. Lucian inched closer to Camellia nervously, almost shrinking behind her.
It's going to be hard for both of us to take you up on that offer.
But I've been in this cave before.
He stroked the side of it, furrowing his brows as he tried to recall.
I know I'd marked it up to easily traverse later. It's a handy shortcut off the path to Helmburn. Then it's settled.
She looks back to the offbeat path, the golden glow of the unnatural specters shining through the trees.
It's better than being out here.
The maid walks into the cave, movements stiff and precise like a clock's.
Wait!
Mika!
He looked between the two of them before staring back at the path, slowly ushering them both inside. They hesitantly walked forward, the darkness of the cave swallowing them up whole. Camellia held Lucian's arm close as he shivered, helping him further through the claustrophobic space. Next to them, Key opened up his door, pulling out a lit oil lamp. He waved it in front of him, the cave echoing with the sound of flickering flames and dripping stalactites. In front of them, Michaela stood, looking around with a blank, analytical expression.
Mika, please.
The blonde woman glanced over, inhaling quietly before walking over, the firelight bouncing off the rim of her spectacles.
If it's at all uncomfortable for Lucian to be in here, I'll be right beside. That's not even the main issue. How did you know about this cave?
I didn't. There was a desire path on the grass, most likely from Key using it so much.
No, I saw you. It's like you knew exactly where to go.
Please stop fighting.
They look over at Lucian, who now had Key patting his back comfortingly. The man began to tear up, gritting his teeth.
Look, it's bad enough that everything is going wrong in this journey, but you two arguing? I can't handle that. Not right now.
The wooden boy looks over at them, frowning with worry. He turned back toward Lucian, giving him a kind smile.
It's okay. I'm sure it's stressful for everyone. Here, look. I know you said you liked them.
He opens up the door again, using his free hand to fish out a wooden boat. Lucian's eyes softened as the boy gingerly handed it to him.
Here you go, sailor.
The young man took it with shaking hands, sniffling up tears as he held it close.
Thank you.
Key's smile widened, then he turned toward the end of the cave. Camellia and Michaela looked into the inky darkness apprehensively.
There's a ton of caverns in here, so it's important to follow me, okay?
They nod, watching him as he hesitantly moves to the front. Letting out an inaudible breath, the wooden boy makes his way forward. The oil lamp's firelight bounced off the gray-black walls of the cave, showing chalk marks on the textured surface ahead. Every so often, Key would walk over to unlit torches embedded into the stone wall and light them, as if he were marking their progress thus far. On the ground, bits of moss, clusters of mushrooms, and stalagmites rose upwards, reaching out towards the ceiling. Water dripped down from dull edges, making the surroundings cool and wet. Camellia flinched as a drop of water plopped on her hair.
Key? Shouldn't we address the elephant in the room?
He closed his mouth, the oil lamp once held outward pulling close as he tensed.
I know why you would be scared. I mean, this must be worse for you. You lived here. Live here.
Even if I did address it, I wouldn't know what to say. I don't know what those things are. They aren't anything I've seen, and they don't look alive.
The cave quieted. The only sounds reverberating through the room were their unsteady breaths and the slow drip of cave water. Key looked over at Michaela with confusion.
Are they not? They're moving. Not everything that moves is alive, Key. Sometimes things that died a long time ago continue to walk, whether they're aware of it or not.
Amelia glances over at her, watching her friend as she trudges through the cave. Previously polished slippers clacking against the ground like weights. This can be bad, but it can also be very good. Especially if that thing is loved and deserves to continue to be loved. But I feel no love from those things. They're like nightmares walking.
Mika, you don't have to talk about this if it'll make you upset.
Michaela looks back at her, giving the woman a reassuring smile. Trust me, I'm fine. Death doesn't scare me. At that, Camellia purses her lips. Meanwhile, Key stares off into the distance, deep in thought. He looks over at Lucian, who was currently fiddling with the boat nervously. He then looks back to the two women, his mouth hinges clacking together.
Do you know anyone who's died before?
The two girls stop their walk, perplexed by his question.
Before?
Camellia turns back to look at him, eyebrows creasing together.
What do you mean by that?
Like someone who died a few times and came back.
Key, when people die, they don't come back.
This statement leaves the cavern in complete quiet, permeated by the sound of the clacking of footsteps. The ambience of it grows tense, steady droplets becoming like war drum beats in the contrast of silence. The cavern seemed to go on forever. No visible change, no outstanding landmarks. But soon they met a fork in the road that appeared almost out of thin air. The group stopped, looking between the two paths.
I don't see any chalk markings. Where are we? I was hoping you would tell us.
Michaela squinted into the darkness, her expression unreadable. She then turned back to look at them, smiling reassuringly. I'm just going to check on ahead, okay? Camellia, keep the boy safe.
Right away, Doc.
The maid pulls on her cheek gently with a stern look, then sighs, letting her go. Key spawns another lantern to give to her, smiling sheepishly. She returns the smile before taking the light and heading off the path. The three stand and wait, Camellia watching Michaela's figure disappear into the darkness. After waiting until the woman was out of earshot, she turned toward her brother, who was unfurling the sails of the model boat nervously.
Is it me, or has she been off lately?
I don't think so. She's usually this quiet. Does she not usually act like this?
Yes, no. Well, she is a bit ominous sometimes, but that's usually to mess with me. Not like this, though.
Well, this is a very harrowing situation. Maybe she just acts this way under stress.
The noble bit her lip, unable to refute that argument. It was true that under extreme duress, Michaela tended to get secretive, spacey, and a plethora of other words she didn't have the brain to come up with at this moment. What wasn't like Michaela, though, was to keep secrets from her. They shared everything, even things like this. Her hand inched up to the side of her jacket, fiddling with an in-sewn pocket. Yes, even things like this they shared. As she stared off into the distance, she jolted, hearing the crumbling of stone. Her head shot up, looking around the cave for the source. Key and Lucian were huddled close together, the wooden boy pointing out different parts of the boat. It couldn't have been them. Then the sound of cracking came from under her feet. She yelped, trying to get out of the way with Lucian and Key, but it was too late. The floor fell out from under her. The three yelled, plummeting further into the cave, the wind buffeting their faces as they fell. Finally, they smacked against soft grass and flowers, their surroundings only lit by the oil lamp and Key's shaking hands. Camellia rubs her hip before looking over at Key and Lucian with worry.
Are you two okay?
Lucian groaned, slowly getting up along with the boy next to him, who shook himself off.
I'm fine.
Key gave a shaky thumbs up before looking around with confusion.
This isn't supposed to be under here.
Camellia got to her feet, looking to see why exactly he was so confused. All around them were roses embedded into the floor, vines crawling up the sides of the sinkhole as if reaching out of the crevice to try to get to the top. These vines weren't unlike the ones from the maze, thorns clipped like a caged bird's wings. The sight would have been beautiful if it weren't for the fact the roses were familiar to her. White and gold, stained, but still growing. She inched closer to Key, who seemed uneasy at the sight.
It's all wrong. They're just roses. The thing is, they're not supposed to be here. Trust me, I know Kalthos.
She quiets, realizing just how distressed the boy was.
It's all wrong. All of it. None of this should be happening, but it is. And I know that something needs to be done about it, but I feel utterly hopeless.
Next to him, Lucian looks down, frowning with sadness. He still fiddles with the boat, but his movements are slow, meandering.
I know the feeling, but you can't let that hurt you. Sometimes you just need to get up and keep walking, even when life pulls you under, because you don't have a choice.
A lump formed in Camelia's throat, but before she could give any input, Lucian got up fully with a smile on his face.
Anyways, we could probably climb up these vines. What do you say, Key?
Key looks at him, then nods. The two boys make their way to the vines, Camellia lingering behind. She lets out a breath before following, glancing to the roses behind her. The two boys were already scaling the wall, using each vine as leverage. Lucian was helping Key up, his upper body strength making the action a piece of cake for him. However, Camellia struggled, feeling the previous soreness inhibit her ability to move. She panted, looking up to see both Lucian and Key at the top already. Lucian looked down at her, his ears pinning back.
Camellia, are you okay? Okay?
I'm fine.
She yelps, slipping down the wall. Her hands grip at vines, but she gasps inwardly as they slither into the rock's cracks. The girl falls back, letting out a shout as her body slams against the flower bed below.
Camellia! Ow. I'll be fine. Is there any way you could spawn a rope?
He nods, frantically opening up his door. His eyes widen, pupils going small as he smacked his hand around the hole in his stomach.
Come on. It's not working. Shit. That's okay. Just go get Michaela.
The wooden boy hesitates before nodding, running off into the distance. Lucian stammers, staring off at Key's exit, then looking down at his sister with fear. He was completely frozen, clutching the boat close. She looks up at him, giving him a shaky smile.
Seriously, it's going to be...
Her words caught in her mouth as she let out a pained yell, wincing as a thorny vine slammed into her leg, pulling her closer to the floor. Her skin serrated, blood dripping onto the roses as more vines gripped around her. Each vine was now reaching up from the cracks of the floor, thick like rods and no longer pruned, practically weapons in their own right. She looked up at Lucian, who gazed down at her with terror. His body was trembling, unable to take a single step.
Luca, I need you to send down a rope from your pack, okay?
She hissed, trying to ignore the pain as the thorns dug into her skin.
Everything will be okay. I can heal myself after.
The man looked down at her, his look of fear soon turning into contemplation. She met his gaze, eyes wild with desperation, trying to pull the vines off of her body.
Luca, please!
Lucian jolts, finally snapping out of his stupor as he frantically grabbed his bag, rummaging through it and pulling out a rope. He threw it down, the length of it hanging over her chest. Camellia grunts, trying to pull free from the vines enough to grapple the rope. Her hand shook, wincing as thorns tore into her skin before she shot her fist out, finally able to grapple the hemp. Her other ripped free from the vines and grabbed just above her first.
Pull!
Lucian grit his teeth, letting out a growl as he braced himself and pulled on the rope. She let out a yelp as the thorns tore further into her, but felt as her body was slowly unlatched from the bladed clench of the roses.
It's working! Keep going!
With a yell of effort, he flung his arms back, tearing her from the vine's jaws and pulling her against the wall. She used the wall as leverage, Lucian acting as an anchor as she scaled her way up. Camellia glanced back to see the vines creeping into the cracks again. When she finally made it to the top, she collapsed on the ground, blood staining the stone floor. Lucian stood next to her, panting as he smacked his sore hands against his pants. He looked down at his sister, eyes wide with fear.
Camellia?
Lucian. Bertolino.
He let out a noise of fear, bending down to the floor to look at her.
Camellia! Camellia! Please don't go. Don't leave me. I'm sorry.
A young Tobias felt fire singe at his eyebrows, hair kept back in a ponytail and burning with embers. He grabs at planks of wood, screaming out as he struggles to lift them off a broken and battered form.
No.
He looks up at the burning church, screaming into the air.
Someone, anyone, please help.
He pants, fire smoke choking him as he continues scratching at the planks, never strong enough to lift them. Tears sizzle against his cheeks, but then he lets out a startled cry as a floorboard falls on him, burning his back. He lifts himself out from under it, seeing more floorboards fall on the pile of wood he tried to save.
No!
And then he wakes up with a start, sweating, horrified. His features darkened by the night. The man pants in bed, looking out his window again, seeing the moon in the sky. He is quiet, before shaking with sobs as he covers his face. He struggles out of bed, tumbling on the ground and coughing. The man gets to his feet, wobbling as he does so, looking at the painting across from him. A very struggled self-portrait, though it was messy, painful, and the face looked melted. Tobias sniffs in tears before walking out of the room toward the kitchen. The mirror next to him cracks more, crumbling as silver stain the floor. He walks into the room, floorboards creaking underneath his feet. It was a small, medieval area with wooden counters and a single hearth. There was no place where he visibly kept food, but he opened up the basket and frowned, finding nothing. Tobias looked at the door, grimacing to himself. Walking up to it, he puts his hand on the doorknob, then immediately shrinks back.
No, that's a bad idea.
He sighs, scratching his head, and with a wince, he held up his hand in a claw. He squinted his eyes shut, wincing as an apple appeared in his hand, a pure red and green Macintosh. He bites into it once, then sighs, sitting at the table and putting his head in his hands.
How did I become so pathetic?
The crickets that were chirping outside become silent. He squints, seeing something out the window. He slowly walks towards the sill, then freezes, face slacking with fear.